Well, so it looks like you have enrolled for Miss Bowman's government class. Now, whether you are listening to this because you enrolled for my online class or because you enrolled for my South Campus federal government class or you enrolled for my South Campus Texas government class, I do the same lecture on the first day of class, no matter what class I have. And I've titled this First Day of Class, an Introduction to Political Behavior, because I want you to get a feel for what I am expecting from you this semester. I want you to hear my nasally voice. I want you to hear my lisp. Want you to get used to it because this is what it is. I am your professor. I'm assuming that I must have been about 8 or 9 months. My name is again Madelyn Bowman. The P stands for Petty. That was my maiden name. And I was born in a clinic in a small town called Rockdale. Now, Rockdale is in the middle of central Texas. So I was born in Texas. And if you've ever met anyone that's from a small town, they'll be able to tell you how close they are to the next largest town or the town with which they identify. So we always say that Rockdale is 60 miles northeast of Austin. Now it is also 60 miles southeast of Waco and about 60 miles northwest of Bryan College Station. It takes about 2.5 hours to get to Houston from Rockdale. And it is a rural area. Definitely, I heard this at every dance. Grab your partner, don't see dogs, here we come with a Cotton Eye Joe! Gotta stop it right there because they start saying bad words. If you're familiar with it at all, it is a lot of fun and it is a staple in country and western dancing, especially where I was in Central Texas. Now, this is an actual picture of downtown Rockdale. The city hall is just beyond this picture. It's tiny, about 5,000, under 5,500 people there today. And it was only slightly more than that when I was living there in from 1970 to 1988. It is it was really basically formed as the trading place for people that had farms, and there were farms all around, and are farms all around, and people would come into town to trade. And then they discovered pretty quickly that there was a lot of lignite, which is a derivative of coal, that were around, grew a lot of cotton, a lot of sorghum, hay, and there were no real big ranches, but there were large farms, some cows around, but that was not the primary source of income in the town. Under Now, the people that ended up settling in the Rockdale area, as is very common of Central Texas, were a lot of Czechoslovakians, a lot of Germans. Rockdale had a very heavy Czechoslovakian population, and they farmed the land and brought their culture and kept their culture intact in many instances. So I am not Czech. I am African American, but definitely, though I did not see people in these outfits every day, there were people in town that had heavy accents. A lot of my teachers were Czechoslovakian. My friends could sing songs in the Czech language. There were always kolaches at every event. I was a grown woman before I realized that everybody didn't do polkas at dances. And so there was a heavy Czechoslovakian influence and culture in the town. I still love kolaches. And those Czechoslovakians were Catholic. And so with a town that was about 60% Caucasian, with the lion's share of those Caucasians being Czechoslovakian, and about 20% Hispanic and about 20% Black, we had a very large parish considering how few people were in town, and it really kind of ran the town. We were a Catholic town. A lot of my teachers were Catholic. I knew the word CCD. I knew the words catechism. I was Baptist, but all my friends were Catholic. I went to Mass. If I spent the night, then I went to Mass. So the people in town were very conservative. And so we heard a lot of religion, a lot of conservative religion, anti-abortion, anti-gay marriage or anti-gay period, anti-birth control in town. And so that was the culture. When our teachers would put the chalk down and just talk, or when you would hear people in the hallway, they would be talking about going to CCD. They would be talking about going to the KC Hall. I quickly learned that I had to have an answer for what are you giving up for Lent. I didn't even know what Lent was, but my friends would tell me when it was starting, or I knew that when people came to school with those crosses, black crosses on their heads, that it was the beginning of Lent. I needed to be able to say what I'd given up, and that Lent ended on Easter. So let's go back to that question of the lignite. The lignite in town really started to be a driver of the economy. So we had this rural farming community that had a bustling center based on the selling of that coal. They were eventually able to attract a company called Alcoa, and Alcoa is still open in the United States. It's publicly traded, and they do metal smelting. That's the best way I can explain it. They made metal products, aluminum products to be specific. And so the pitch to Alcoa was you can use the coal, you can be completely self-contained, you can cut down on your energy costs and make all the aluminum foil and aluminum siding that you could possibly make. This was huge for the town. And Alcoa moved in and completely changed the way of life in town, because now people were moving from all over the place. There were engineers, there were scientists. If you were not employed at Alcoa, you were employed because of Alcoa, and it just became a huge part of town. You had to have a high school diploma to be able to work at Alcoa. You could work at one of the contractors. Brown and Root was the company that did the mining, and so you didn't have to have a high school diploma to work at Brown and Root, but Brown and Root wasn't paying as well as Alcoa. So Alcoa quickly, and the union that formed really quickly became the hub of life in our town. And people were making good money. There was a lot of property ownership. People were just prosperous in town because either they worked for Alcoa or they worked at a grocery store that served Alcoa. The schools were super nice because Alcoa paid nice property taxes, and schools are funded through state funds and through property taxes. So it was, at the time, just a dreamy little place to live. Now, neither of my parents were employed at Alcoa. Actually, both of my parents were teachers. So I saw this video one time, and it completely reminded me of my dad. And I'll play the video for you, and then I'll explain why.
Hello, parents. It's going to be a big school year. Your kids are going to climb rope. They're going to have a year-long tug-of-war with the ceiling. And by the time they get out of 8th grade, they're going to do it with sweat on their brow and achievement in their hearts. So, this is what they're going to need. Running shoes, t-shirts, tube socks, fruit cups, cheese sticks, energy bars, rope climbing gloves, rope burn ointment, and a jump drive. Not sure what that is, but they're going to be jumping.
School takes a lot. Target has it all.
So the reason that video reminds me of my dad is because he did have a deep, gravelly voice. He was a football coach, 8th grade, football and track. He brought into the school district several years of service in the military. He went into the military as an officer, went to officer training school at Fort Bragg, and then was immediately sent to Germany. The Army had integrated by this time, but he was in one of the last all-black units, and he quickly rose through the ranks. But he brought that military officer tradition to 8th grade. And so he was a scary, scary guy. He taught earth science, because coaches always have to teach a course, and he was very good at it. Could name any rock, but he just lived for football. And he was an excellent strategist, and the high school coaches would send him to scout, and he was just a scary, scary guy. But I was a daddy's girl, so he didn't scare me. Who scared me was my mom. Now, I saw this video, and it reminds me of Mom. So I'll play this one.
Well, we tried the whole pink thing. Nope. All she wants to wear is hoodies and cargo shorts, getting dirty. Then she left some crayons in her pocket, and they went through the wash. I thought all her clothes were ruined. Enter Tide and Tide Booster. The stains are gone. It's kind of too bad. Another car garage, honey? Beautiful. That's my Tide. What's yours? Find the Tide that's right for you at Tide.com.
So we'll have to explore one of these days why I see myself in images of people that don't look like me physically. But I do know that my mother was perfect lady. I have three brothers, three older brothers, and she was pretty excited to have a girl, and she just Miss Etiquette would taught us how to set the table and would read etiquette books to us, and she was really excited to have a girl, and what she got was I did not like pink. I still don't like pink to this day because it just seemed too stereotypical to me, I guess. And I played football. I cracked my tooth and I was pretty proud of it. And I cracked it before I lost my baby teeth, so my parents did not get it fixed. I would show anybody that would look. I climbed trees and I had this mouth that mom was always apologizing for. She was always looking at me like that lady looked at her daughter. It's beautiful. Okay. But the thing about it was that mom was a biology teacher by the time I came along. She taught several other subjects, but she was exclusively the biology teacher, and she was the chair of the science department, and she was on the scholarship board at Alcoa, and she was very prominent in the community. And anytime that politicians wanted to get elected, they would come to mom and she would help them work on their campaign. She would register people to vote. She was formidable, formidable. And she ran our house with more military precision. Dad took care of the yard and took care of the cars, but inside that house, everything was perfect except my room. So this was my life, a child of teachers in an industrial town with a lot of farmers around, and just quite frankly, not a lot of black people around. So I
We may be tokens, but we're damn good looking ones. You think it would dishonor Dr. King's memory if I went to sit in the back of the bus?
So we need to talk about how iconic Jody Landon is. 20 years ago, Daria came to MTV. The show focused on the shade icon herself, Daria Morgendorfer, and her family and schoolmates at Lawndale High.
This looks well balanced.
Ew!
Damn it, we've got 4 mouths to feed. Food costs money.
I knew it.
The show was really ahead of its time. It touched on feminism, social class, and thanks to one of the show's few characters of color, Jody, race as well. Homegirl literally ran Lawndale High School.
Thank you, Jody Landon, valedictorian of the graduating class of Rockdale High.
I'm president of the French Club, vice president of student council, editor of yearbook, and I'm also on the tennis team.
She had the black boyfriend, box braids poppin', unapologetic attitude. She carried herself with so much class and dignity.
Someday I'd like to own my own business. Maybe a consulting firm geared toward minority startups.
Truly was someone that I wanted to be best friends with. But she was also very vocal about what it means to be under this gaze of being the perfect minority and this token black girl.
At home, I'm Jody. I can say or do whatever feels right. But at school, I'm the queen of the Negroes, the perfect African American teen, the role model for all of the other African American teens at Lawndale. Oops, where'd they go?
To its credit, the show positioned Jody to be the biggest critic of the show's overwhelming whiteness.
Isn't it great how they keep electing us homecoming king and queen every year?
Yes, it's such a generous and enlightened gesture. It completely makes up for the town's utter lack of diversity, in my mind.
And we're playing into it.
Damn college applications.
This is so humiliating.
Jody was woke before woke even knew what woke was.
Why play into this stupid charade any more than we have to?
What happened?
Oh, what the hell? We may be tokens, but we're damn good looking ones.
Not only were Jody and her boyfriend Mac McKenzie some of the few characters of color, but they were also the only secondary characters to have a three-dimensional storyline.
So I think about that. I was not valedictorian. I was number 4 in my class. Still a little upset about that. Should have taken one more honors class. I was president of the class. I was president of the student body. I was in student council from 6th grade on. I was a cheerleader from 7th grade to 11th grade. I hurt my knee and did not try out my senior year. And I lived a little, now in retrospect, a little charmed life. People were definitely on their best behavior. There was not a lot of overt racism in the town, but there were also not a lot of black people. Now, this picture on the right is not my church, but it could very easily be my church. We did have red seats, we did have paneling, and I went to a church called New Hope Baptist Church, which is an indicator for those of you that don't know that we were a split from another church. Baptists don't get along very well, and so they will pick up their marbles and start new churches all the time, and you'll see that indicated in Second Baptist Church or Greater Mount Zion. That usually means that there was a split and people got upset about something. So we were New Hope Baptist Church that split from Springfield, which was another African American church in town. And then there was a Third Baptist Church called Rising Star, also a split. So, as you can imagine, I do not know who said this. I want to say it was James Baldwin that said the most segregated time in the United States is Sunday mornings. So my church was segregated, my town was segregated. I never really thought about it, but we had some tracks down the middle of town, and that separated the east side from the west side. And black people primarily lived on the east side with the exception of one street on the west side, and I believe most of those people were related. They were all related that lived on that one street, but it was primarily African American. And I would hear things like, "You're one of the good ones. You're different. I don't think of you as black." I would hear all those things, and I never really processed what that was doing to my psyche. Well, in a way I did, because when I got ready to go to college, and coming from several lines of teachers, my grandparents both got their masters. My grandfather was a principal. All of my brothers had graduated from college. I was going to college. I wasn't going to be able to go and take my high school diploma and make $25 an hour at Alcoa. Although in retrospect, that might not have been the worst idea. But I really wanted to go to Howard University. Really wanted to go to Howard University. But I was talked out of it and got several offers, or applied several places and got accepted several places, and one of my top was Prairie View A&M University in Waller, Texas, where both of my parents had graduated. I had been encouraged to take ag my senior year. That was really odd, agriculture class. So I needed to keep my GPA up, so I couldn't get in there and slack. So I learned how to judge cows and learned how to identify cows, and I learned how to judge sheep and a little bit about tractor mechanics. That was really the third course in the ag sequence, but we did a little bit of it at the end of ag 2. And it would seem very odd to me I was, as I'm making my decisions, I go and I visit Rice University where I'd been accepted, and I really liked Rice. It was a small, little nerdy area, and they told me that I didn't even have to try out for cheerleader. If I had been a cheerleader before, I was automatically on the cheerleading squad. Are you kidding me? And I went to class and was able to answer all of the questions because I had gotten such a good education in Rockdale High School, and all the students apparently were asleep or hungover. I don't know which. There was a pub on campus, so um, I've just decided that if I was going to stay in Texas, because Howard was going to be out of reach and I didn't get accepted at Princeton, that Rice was the place that I wanted to go. I had also been accepted at Texas A&M. I'd also been accepted at University of Texas, and um, both of them were actually offering scholarships. So what I knew was that I did not want to go to Texas A&M. I was pretty clear that I did not want to go to Texas A&M University. It wasn't far. I had been there several times. I had gone to a bonfire and I was traumatized, just traumatized. And you have to remember, this is 1986, 1987. This was when Texas A&M was still making the huge bonfires before the accident that made them reevaluate the safety of the whole process. And I came back and I told my mom, I was like, Mom, listen. They had men, no cheerleaders, men up on the stage, and they had on overalls. And I was just over overalls. I, I had seen enough. I had seen enough in Rockdale. And the guys in the overalls started moving their hands, and everybody in the crowd started moving their hands the same way, and then in unison, hundreds of people started yelling the same thing at the same time. As far as I was concerned, that was a cult, and I wanted no parts of it. So if we couldn't afford to send me to Rice, because Rice was only offering about a $2,000 scholarship, and if you know anything about private schools, that wasn't going to help much. That would buy me some books. Then University of Texas was going to be it. I was going to go to Austin. So we sat down to have our family meeting, and my dad actually just did not talk much. He didn't have to. He grunted a lot, and we knew what the grunts meant, and people were so scared of him, they usually just listened to what he had to say, and then he would leave it alone. So we got ready to sit down, and I had all my notes, and I was going to convince my parents that Rice was going to be the best location for me, but if we could not do Rice, because it never crossed my mind that my parents couldn't afford it, but if we weren't going to do Rice, then I was going to go to University of Texas, because at least they had co-ed dorms. And my dad talked first, and he answered and said, "You're going to A&M." And that's exactly the way he said it. "You're going to A&M." And I was like, "Are you, Daddy? Are you kidding me? I can't go to that. I'm sorry, hick school. I can't." So, I ended up graduating from Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas, home of the Fighting Texas Aggie Band and the Corps and Scale Down Bonfire and so many traditions that you can't really get your hands around it. I know all the words to the song that I just played. I need to just stop and pause and just talk a little bit about what all this meant. What growing up in a rural Texas, Central Texas town with a lot of farmers and a huge industry and a lot of people that were Catholic and people that were in unions, what that did to me and for me. Basically, everybody in town at the time was Democrat. They were conservative, but they were Democrats. And you have to remember that the demographics of Texas and parties have completely shifted since the 80s. This really happened in the 2000s. I was well out of school. But I didn't even meet a person that said that they were a Republican until somebody moved to town. His dad was an engineer and he moved to town. So I grew up with conservative democratic values. The Czechoslovakians are very generous. Catholics are very generous. They believe in helping your fellow man. They believe in seeing through what a person is saying and meeting their needs. And so that was what I grew up around. And then plus being African Americans shifted to the Democratic Party in earnest in the 60s with Lyndon Johnson. Some moved over with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but it was pretty complete in the 60s. And the Democratic Party had this very uncomfortable, some very uncomfortable growing pains as they tried to figure out what was a Democratic Party going to be. But Lyndon Johnson really led the Democratic Party toward addressing racial inequality with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. And so I was a Democrat, and everybody I knew was a Democrat. I get to Texas A&M, and things were changing in the state. More people were starting to identify as Republican, and it was no longer a bad word. It wasn't the bad word that it had been right after the Civil War, when Republican meant anti-slavery and rights for African Americans. And so, and suppression of the South. And I think that may be the key, that the Republican Party stood for suppression of the South. And then as Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan come and they have a completely different message, more people are starting to move over to the Republican Party, not the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. And a lot of people were really not happy about that civil rights angle of the Democratic Party. So it pushed people out, pushed white people out. And so the Democratic Party is different. This was starting to happen in the late 80s, early 90s when I was at Texas A&M. I do remember voting in the primaries in 1992, and I walked into the Democratic primary and voted and walked back out, and my friends were in the line for the Republican primary, and that line was through the building and actually down the street, and I was floored. I graduated from Texas A&M and went to Baylor University School of Law. And so I found this really pretty picture. This is not the building that I was in. They built a new building after the tobacco settlements after I graduated, and a lot of the attorneys that helped Texas win huge amounts of money from tobacco companies went to Baylor Law School. So when they got their portion of pay, one of the things that they did was got together and built a new law school. Baylor is a very traditional Baptist school. The officials there were very conservative and not Czechoslovakian nice conservative. They were just conservative, capitalist conservative. And I did not fit in. I did not fit in. I got a really good education at Baylor. And I actually practiced law for quite some time. And I really only say that to say this. As a person that was trained in the law, you will find that I gravitate toward those things, those issues and cases, because they make me comfortable, because I can understand them, I can understand how they fit, and I just kind of gravitate towards cases. And so when you are discussing things, when you are doing your essays on exams, just don't forget to mention cases. If the case was mentioned in your text, then I am looking for you to mention the case in your writing, because that's just what I look for. I am still a Democrat. As I get older, I find myself becoming more and more tolerant and more liberal. And so I tell you that not because I am trying to hide the ball. I'm trying to do just the opposite. I am not trying to indoctrinate you. I want you to discover how your life and what you went through and what you saw and experienced and who your parents were led you to where you are. And just give me the grace of knowing that I speak through a filter, and I am not evil because I am liberal. I am, and you are not wrong. If sometimes when you hear me talking, I say something and you're going, what? I just want you to know why you're saying why you might disagree with some of the things that I say and some of the comments that I might make when I am grading your discussion boards. That makes neither of us wrong. Because unless you were born in Rockdale, Texas in 1970 to Laura and James, then your perspective is going to be completely different. When you do your videos, your introduction videos, and especially when you do assignment 1, I want you to do this same exploration. This course is one where I am asking you to do a lot of critical thinking. I'm asking you to think outside the box. I'm asking you to go to places that are uncomfortable, because we, although right now we seem to be able to move into uncomfortable places. Life has shoved America into some very uncomfortable places. We have to examine what we think about them and not shy away from it. The I don't like politics, so I don't talk about it excuse is not going to work in this class, because we need to look. And so I will be asking you provocative questions, and I want you to give me your full educated opinion, because I want you to have one. And as long as we are respectful of each other, we're respectful of the fact that we all come from different places and have different perspectives, this can be a great semester. So I hope that it is that for you. I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say, and I just wanted you to get used to my voice. Now, I have done 40 minutes of talking. I apologize. But I do like the sound of my own voice, and I don't have anybody's face to tell me when to be quiet. So, get ready for it, because more long lectures are coming. Have a great day, and I look forward to this semester. And it quickly became a hub, a place where you could purchase lignite. They insisted that the railroad go through Rockdale, and we actually had a stop in Rockdale on the train where they would refuel and get some more lignite to burn to keep on the train ride. Sold a lot of the lignite to Texas A&M, which was an hour away, and the University of Texas, which was also an hour away. And those farms